Okay, YouTube. This is the third video in my series on my Lineshaft project in my workshop in France. Today I'm going to be focusing on the progress I've made so far with the main lineshaft, which is the one I'm going to work on first, and it's the one that came from the PEX sock factory in Leicester. So, I've made an initial go at cleaning up the main shaft. I've taken the bearings off. There were two bearings on the shaft. I've removed these. I'll show you these in a minute. And I've had an initial go at cleaning up the shaft. And it was red with rust before, caked thick rust. It's now still got quite a lot of black kind of rusty patina on it. We'll call it a patina for the moment. But certainly after a couple of hours, good couple of hours work on it yesterday, it's a lot cleaner than it was. So I'm going to spend more time on that because I know that I can get it better than this. I don't think it needs to be like a brand new shiny piece of bright silvery steel. That would be probably just going over the top and it would probably detract it from its character. But I know I can get it looking a bit better, and I think it'll look pretty smart if it's a bit shinier still. See, there's still quite a lot of that black stuff which will come off. After trying various methods, what I found worked best was a wire brush mounted in the drill. And actually, once the wire brush worn down to a kind of very short stub, you actually get a much better bite, and that takes the rust off quite effectively. So I'm going to keep that and keep using it until it's not usable anymore, and then change it to another one. So, more progress to be made with that, but a start has been made. Meanwhile, I'll transfer my attention to and your attention to the bearings. These are the components of one of the bearings. They look a bit sort of silhouetted against that white mat actually, but well, let's go with it. Yeah, okay, so first of all, you can see that there's this lovely cast iron housing which is in two halves. And sorry, a few camera issues there, bear with me. Yeah, lovely cast iron housing in two halves. Now, these have been painted at one point, and you probably won't be able to see, but it seems to me that the colour they were painted was a kind of dark grey, which, by happy coincidence, is the colour of paint that I was going to put on them, and I already have. I'm going to paint the cast components British Standard Dark Sea Grey. That's the name of the Ariel colour. So, there's a little groove in the end of each of these bearings, which is designed to take this piece of fibrous packing that slots into the groove. So these are all complete and will go back. And now the actual bearing components themselves. First of all, we have this collar. It's a threaded collar and there's a taper on the unthreaded part. That fits fairly snugly over the shaft in a sliding fit. The bearing is loose in the shaft, but it fits quite tightly as a press fit onto that collar. Well, I call it a press fit, but what happens is when you screw the I think what would be called a thrust collar onto this, it kind of opens up and grips the shaft and the bearing at the same time, which is quite interesting really, but it seems to be quite effective. And it means that there's no serious pressing to be done. These things will slide on more or less together and then tighten up by being screwed. There's this kind of toothed washer, and then there's this threaded collar, which, so basically you push that onto the shaft, you then push the bearing onto this, and then you put that on, and then you put that on and tighten it up, and it all locks together. After which you can then put the two halves of your housing over the completed bearing, like so. And it's all very nice really, all in good condition. Now, when I bought the Lineshaft, I wasn't expecting it to have ball bearings. I thought it was going to have plain bearings, but it certainly does have ball bearings. And on taking this apart, I found that these beautifully shiny ball bearings, which actually look like they could just have been bought brand new, are made by SKF. Now, what I learned was that SKF first patented their ball bearings in 1907, and they started with I'm just trying to read it off my bit of paper here, a multi-row self-aligning radial ball bearing. And I'm wondering if that is one of these, because it does have two rows of balls, and you know that's rotated in its ring there, but it would certainly seem to meet that description. So whether these go back as far as 1907, I do not know. I doubt it, because PEX started in 1914. And they're still going actually, but PEX were manufacturing in the UK in Leicester from 1914 through to about the late 1990s, when they then transferred their operations offshore. So, to be completely neutral about it, these bearings, brand new and shiny looking as they are, could have been made any time, I guess between 1914 and the late 1990s. Now, opening this thing up, I didn't get the feeling that that it had been open for quite a long time, so it may be that this bearing is a lot older than it looks. So anyway, I can't really put an exact age on the line shaft with that, but certainly it would appear that these bearings could have been installed any time after 1914. So I don't know. If I get any more information on that, I'll mention it in a subsequent video. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to clean the old paint off these, the housing, or the outside of the housing. I'm going to treat it with some of this stuff, Geyser, which is a degreasing agent, just to take off any residual grease, and then I'm going to give it an undercoat and then a top coat of paint. So we'll see how far I get with that, and I'll get back to you. So a few minutes later, and I'm just hitting these bearing housings with a brass brush and the drill, just to get any surface rust off and an attempt to get paint off. Now it's funny because it's so difficult to tell what we're looking at here, whether it is actually some of it's grey paint or whether it's all just cast iron, and the colour being very close. I'm not very sure, but what I think I will do is just hit it with some paint remover anyway. Just a small amount of this paint removing gel, just to give it the benefit of the doubt, take off any paint that's there, and then degrease it, and then give it 2 coats of paint. And by the way, to remind you, just the bearings that I'm working on looked like these a little while ago, so they were pretty cruddy, and they're coming up quite nicely now. Yeah, and here we go with the paint stripper. I've just coated the outsides of them in this stuff. It's a manky job, but somebody's got to do it. The thing is, because of the colour of what paint is on them, I'm not sure how much paint there is, and whether I'm looking at grey paint or grey cast iron at any given point. We'll find out when the paint stripper begins to take effect, if it takes effect. If it doesn't, it means there ain't no paint on there in the first place. We shall see. Well, a wee bit later, and we're definitely seeing some kind of paint removing action on the bearing housing, so we'll just let that stuff do its thing for a bit longer. While I've been waiting, I decided to busy myself by packing the 2 bearings with new grease. Now, I know you're not supposed to pack them literally, so I went a bit easy on it, but there's a fair old bit of grease in there, and I've got them wrapped up in, I'm going to wrap them up in this here piece of tin foil just to stop any rubbish from getting into them. I've decided that much as I hate taking paint off with paint stripper, I've found a new passion, which is packing bearings with grease. It was great fun. I want to be a bearing packer when I grow up. By the way, I noticed that the castings for the bearing housings have also got SKF on them, so it may have been a complete unit, and guess maybe made in Sweden. So it's interesting. Call it amateur industrial archaeology for dummies. Well, I put on more of that damn paint remover stuff, so while I was waiting for it to dry, I thought I would just busy myself with chopping up some firewood so that I can sit here tonight when the sun goes down in front of my outdoor fireplace, in front of a fire, drinking a beer and thinking about the Lineshaft project. Yay folks, it's Geyser time, all the way from Geyser, Arizona. One slavering of this raspberry pink devil will have these degreased and ready for painting in no time. Geyser, I've got a long and checkered history with this stuff. I tell you, this chemicals habit has got to stop. Well, you can see that the geyser's going all sort of light pink and gloopy and jelly-like on the cast iron. I think that means that it's picking up the surface grease and doing its work. So in a little while I'll take them to the tap and wash all that off, and then I'll put them out in the sun to bake for a little while, and then they'll be ready for painting. But while I'm waiting for all that to happen, if them dry off and so on, I'm going to turn my attention to this bad boy, which is one of the hangers. It is still pretty mucky, it's covered in surface grease, it's about the same state that the bearings were, but it doesn't look like it should be too difficult a job to take apart. Famous last words. I don't know whether these nuts are seized onto their threads or not, but we'll find out. So I'll be starting on that shortly. Well, that came apart very easily, not a stuck bolt and nut in sight. Lovely thing. One little interesting featurette here is that on the legs of the main casting there are two symmetrical little notches, and none of the other two hangers, which are identical in every other way, have that. And it looks to me like a pulley has been hung on the line shaft too close to the hanger, and as it spun round, it's presumably quite hard steel rim cut these little grooves in that. So there it is, living history. But yeah, nice piece of cast iron. I love cast iron. They should make an edible version, really. Meanwhile, round here, we're on to painting. These little nuggets are all lined up, ready for their base coat of paint. Now, I had a bit of a muck up there because this paint here, Tractol, it's great paint. It's used for machinery generally and all kinds of really tough jobs on metal. I've got a tin of the primer, and I thought I had a tin of light grey and a tin of British Standard Dark Sea Grey. But it turns out I've got 2 tins of light grey. I think I must have made a mistake when I was ordering. I wanted light grey for something else. But I don't live here in France. I mean, some of you may be aware of that. This is my holiday home and holiday workshop. So I bring stuff over with me. And so I haven't brought any British Standard Dark Sea Grey Tractol with me, which is a shame. However, I have an alternative, which is this. It's Painter's Touch. Made by Rust-Oleum, and it's dark grey, and it's very, very close to the British Standard Dark Sea Grey. And despite the fact that it's widely available in DIY stores, it actually works pretty well. I sprayed my milling machine with it, my lathe with it, and it seems to be pretty tough. So I'm going to use that instead, rather than delay things. It will be fine. And probably virtually indistinguishable from the dark sea grey when I get some for the hangers and so on. So I'm going to get started on that in a minute. Primer and top coat. So here we are, the 2 bearings are done. Everything's been loosely hand fitted together again, and there's no point in doing it any other way because they're not back on the shaft yet. They look great. Everything's been cleaned up and grazed, and the paint job is nice. Would you believe it? Just as soon as I had used the spray paint, I found the dark grey Tractol. But never mind. These things happen, and it'll be perfectly fine as it is. I'm going to be honest though, the thing that I'm not pleased about is the fact that I didn't have any C-spanners with me to remove these collars. They were pretty tight, and I resorted to using a drift. Wood was splintering, and I ended up using something metal, something made of steel, to loosen the C-nuts with, and because of that I've chewed the notches, and I'm quite disgusted with myself about that, really. I should have been more patient and slowed down and thought it through, but I knew I didn't want to go trailing away into town in a fruitless search for C-spanners of the right size, so I decided just to get on with it. I don't think it's critical. I think they'll be fine, and even if they're not, there are 2 other bearings on the shelf the same, which probably won't be used in this project, so worst case scenario I can always take bits out and swap them over. But that's not the way to go, and I feel bad about it. But I'm overall pretty pleased with the bearings. Apart from that aspect, they're nice, and fit together. The cast iron shells of them fit together beautifully. In passing, SKF were a Swedish firm starting in 1907, as I mentioned earlier, but these have got, I noticed that on some of the parts inside they have SKF Great Britain written on them, so by the time this was made, SKF obviously had branched out to become a multinational concern. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm not going to be back in France now until the end of May, and I'm going to have to do some work on the house then, but when I'm over I will try and make some progress with the hangar, which is going to sit there waiting for me for a couple of months, and I'll be making more videos on this project at that point. Cheers.